Okay, everybody, Stephen Key here, and I have, like I said, a very special guest, Phil McKinney. He's here. So, Phil, you're a creative guy. I know you do a lot of stuff out there helping creative people. You've got everything from books, podcasts, articles. You've been doing this for your whole career. What do you do, and why would someone care to listen to the information you provide? Who is that person? Is it an inventor, a creative person, a company? Tell us a little bit about you, and why would people care to listen to you?
Well, in my case, my own personal background, I've been in the innovation space for 30 years, inventing. I won my first Product of the Year award at the old Comdeck show. Now I'm really dating myself. So I won a Product of the Year. That was my first time. I went on to win 14 Product of the Year awards over my career. Just ones I directly involved, much less teams that I was coaching or advising. Ultimately, most recently, prior to my current position, I found myself as the Chief Technology Officer at Hewlett-Packard. So in running what we call the Innovation Program Office. So effectively, it was the innovation team for all of HP. So that team's job was to create the next generation of products and technologies. So a lot of what I get asked was always about what is it, what I did to achieve my success, could others learn it? And I'm a big believer that creativity is not a DNA thing. You can learn it like any other skill. It's like a muscle, but you got to exercise it. You got to use it. You got to go out there and you're not going to wake up on a Friday and say you're running the Boston Marathon on Monday. So you got to commit to it just as you would commit to any other effort that you want to commit to. So all the books, the podcasts, the article writing, all of that is to convey people the lessons I've learned, mistakes I've made also. Listeners of it range from chief innovation officers at big multinationals down to lone inventors in their garage who maybe have an interesting idea, but are struggling with, how to move forward with it, how to turn it into something. And all of it came out of a conversation I had with my mentor, Bob Davis, who I went back to him after when I was at HP, and I said, look, the mentoring he gave me right out of college was second to none. And the amount of time he committed to my career, I don't know where I would have been without Bob's influence and direction. And I went back and asked him, how do I pay it back? He's retired and drives a bus for special needs kids in Phoenix, Arizona. And he laughed. He goes, you can't pay it back. You need to go pay it forward. You need to go find ways to pay it forward. And I did, I'm a big believer in internships and coaching and mentoring and those kinds of things. But in this case, I started to experiment with a new kind of technology. Wow, a new thing called podcasting back in 2005. And we started that experiment in 2005 doing a podcast to see if there's a way for my pay it forward to scale it. And so podcasting thing worked out pretty well, and we're still at it and loving it. And I also see it as my creative outlet. I don't know what I'd go if I didn't do a show every week. I think I'd probably go nuts at this point. It's become part of my life.
Give me the statistics on this podcast. It's the longest running podcast. Is that what I just heard?
Yeah, it's the longest continuously produced podcast in history. We started in March of 2005. So we just wrapped up season 17. And on March 1st, we launched season 18. And it kind of, it's one of those funny things in the fact that I now have listeners who are younger than the age of my podcast. So does it's kind of that indication that you're getting old, right? Okay. You've been doing something. But yeah, no, from the very very early days, podcasting really got started at the end of 2004. Adam Curry and a bunch of the early players, and then we started March 5th, 2005 with episode number 1. Thought it would just be kind of a fun experiment. We now, like I said, season 17, and we average about 50 shows a year.
Wow.
For the podcast.
You got on there early. Now you do a lot of writing about this too. You've written how many articles or blogs? What's the number on that?
I do a weekly blog. So I do a weekly show for the podcast. This podcast is about 30, 35 minutes. And,
Okay.
you know how long it takes to get a script ready to actually start, to do a show. That's a little bit of a lift. And then the weekly articles. So I post regularly. I do that on my blog at philmckinney.com, which also gets cross-posted to Medium and Substack. And, you can find it pretty much everywhere. But yeah, I do that. And then I used to be a contributor to Forbes. I was one of the first contributors to Forbes when they first put that together. I've kind of backed off on those outside activities and have just focused, because in my case, the reason I write the blog or I do the podcast is part of a strategy of paying it forward, which was really a challenge given to me by my early mentor, Bob Davis. So I'm kind of fulfilling a commitment I made, which was to take what I've learned and give it away freely. So we don't charge for the content.
Okay.
100% of all the author royalties for my book go to charity.
Okay.
Anything left over out of real hard expenses, for instance, on the podcast, Zoom is a sponsor, but anything left over that gets donated to charity. Nothing comes to me personally.
Now you've got a book out too. What is the book called? I wrote it down here.
It's called Beyond the Obvious.
Yes.
And it actually got initiated because of the podcast. So I was contacted by an agent, Mark Gerald, who is now my agent, who was a listener of the podcast and, said, "Hey, I think you've got a book in here." So this would have been early 2010.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay, I'm the CTO at HP. I'm traveling 45 weeks a year and got a 80-hour-a-week job. When am I going to have time to write a book? So, but Mark and his team came alongside and we took some of the early concepts that were in the podcast, but also flushed a lot of it out to a lot more detail. And the book came out. I finished the manuscript in June of 11, and the book was released by Hyperion in February of 12. And then Hyperion's gotten acquired by Hachette, or Hackett, depending on how you want to pronounce it. And now it's in its fourth printing. So it's continue, even though it's 10 years, it's 2012. So it's been 10 years. The book's been out 10 years, but it's still hanging in there, still sells. It's actually getting picked up by a lot of college classes now, or picking it up as a textbook kind of, but it teaches really the concept of how to refine your own personal creativity, and then how to look beyond that first obvious idea that you have. How do you dig deep? How do you kind of unlock yourself, not to do what 99% of everybody else does? Do the 1%, take that one extra step and unlock a much better idea, much higher impact, much better return, those kinds of ideas.
Wow. So if anybody that wants to exercise that muscle, that wants to be more creative, more innovative, no matter if you're with a company or solo inventor, please follow Phil. We're going to put all the things down below because he has so many free resources. I love the free resources. So find Phil, listen to him. He knows what he's talking about. He's been doing it forever. Phil, thank you very much for coming on inventRightTV.
Thanks for having me.